the ruin of the Temple of Jerusalem, the end of stone, the beginning of spirit. Kardec teaches that Jesus, when predicting the destruction of the temple, was not speaking of punishment, but of a natural consequence of moral laws. The temple, a symbol of formal religion and priestly power, had strayed from its spiritual mission, transforming into a center of vanity and materialism. Living faith had been replaced by empty rites, love for one's neighbor, by the ostentation of worship. It was inevitable that the form would perish for the spirit to be reborn. Spiritism, like Christ, shows that nothing perishes unjustly. Everything that falls in the world of forms falls to make way for what is purer and truer. The destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem by the Roman legions in the year 70 was the material sign of a moral transition, the end of external worship and the birth of the inner worship of conscience. The kingdom of God ceased to be a place and became a state of soul. The spiritual history reveals that all religions go through this cycle. When the letter kills the spirit, when the institution overrides the living faith, providence acts through renewal. Just as the body ages to free the spirit, human structures crumble so that truth may advance. Jerusalem, in this context, represented the ancient materialistic humanity that needed to die for the gospel to flourish across the earth. Archaeology and history confirm the accuracy of Jesus' words. Herod's temple, the pride of Judaism, was completely destroyed, leaving only fragments of its walls. But the spiritual message that emanated from it endured and rose above the ruins. The same happens with the human being. When pride collapses, the soul finds the true altar, the purified heart. Spiritual sociology shows that every civilization is a reflection of the moral state of its people. When selfishness prevails, structures collapse. When love governs, society rises in a new light. The ruin of the temple was the natural consequence of the moral imbalance of its time, just as today the planet experiences crises that prepare for the advent of a regenerated humanity. There is no unjust destruction. There is a cyclical renewal of evolutionary laws. The physics of entropy and renewal confirms this universal principle. Everything that organizes around disharmonious energies tends toward dissolution, while what vibrates in harmony perpetuates itself. The temple collapsed because it was sustained by vibrations of pride and domination. But the divine law, which is order and love, raised the sanctuary of spiritual consciousness over its ruins. Kardec explains that the words of Christ, "Not one stone will be left upon another," have symbolic and cosmic meaning. Not only the temple, but every material and moral structure built on selfishness is destined to fall. It is the law of purification that governs worlds and souls. What is false collapses, what is true remains. Jesus announced with this prophecy the beginning of the era of the Spirit, where faith would no longer depend on temples, but on inner light. The quantum physics of consciousness can illustrate this process. When a structure loses coherence, its energy is reorganized at another level. This also happens in civilizations. The collapse of one system is the birth of another. The ruin of Jerusalem was the moral collapse of an era and the vibrational birth of spiritual Christianity, which would transform the world with the power of love and truth. Moral neuroscience shows that paradigm shifts require pain and crisis. The human brain, like societies, resists change until the tension becomes unbearable. The collapse of the old religious system was the necessary shock to free humanity from fear and formalism, paving the way for reasoned and universal faith. Jesus knew that the fall of the stone would be the awakening of consciousness. Kardec teaches that each of us also carries our inner temple, the structure of old beliefs, habits, and pride that need to crumble. When pain shakes these internal walls, it is not punishment, it is liberation. Christ is reborn in us when the ego gives way to humility, and the altar of the heart replaces the stone altar. Spiritual science and cosmic physics converge on the same law. Destruction is merely another name for transformation. Nothing is lost. Everything is renewed. The Temple of Jerusalem fell, but the light of Christ remained, raising an eternal temple, that of universal brotherhood. Understanding the ruin of the Temple of Jerusalem is understanding that spiritual progress is inevitable and that all apparent destruction is merely the announcement of a new life. What crumbles is matter, the spirit remains and rises. If this reflection has brought you clarity and faith, share it. Because understanding the ruin of the Temple of Jerusalem is recognizing that no stone withstands time, but the love of God is indestructible and eternal.